The content of this podcast has not been evaluated by Health Canada or the FDA. It is educational in nature and should not be taken as medical advice. Always consult a qualified medical professional to see if a diet, lifestyle change, or supplement is right for you. Any supplements mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Please note that the opinions of the guests or hosts are their own and may not reflect those of Advanced Orthomolecular Research Incorporated. Welcome to Supplementing Health, a podcast presented by Advanced Orthomolecular Research. We are all about applying evidence-based and effective dietary, lifestyle, and natural health product strategies for your optimal health. In each episode, we will feature very engaging clinicians and experts from the world of functional and naturopathic medicine to help achieve our mission to empower people to live their best lives naturally. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Supplementing Health. The more we learn about the inner workings of the human body, the more ways we find to slow the aging process and support our bodily functions. However, regardless of how many advances are made, there are always some tried and true activities that hold steady, one of which is physical activity. So on today's episode, Pete McCall is here to discuss how we can use physical activity to support healthy aging. Besides working with individual clients and teaching group fitness classes, Pete has more than 15 years of experience educating personal trainers around the world. Welcome, Pete. Thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you and your guests, or you and your listeners. I'm the guest of the listeners.
So beyond vanity, what are some of the reasons that it's really important to stay active as we age?
I love that question because, yes, I just want to throw it out there. Everybody wants to look a little bit better, right? And that's one of the reasons why we use exercise. But if we put that to the side, I think it's more important to think of exercise as a means for controlling how we age. We can't stop the fact that we're going to age. That's out of our control. But exercise really allows you to manage how the aging process affects your body.
And so do you think that there is an age where people should or more commonly do become cognizant of exercise impact on their aging body systems?
I think that's a good question. And I think that's probably somewhere in the 50s or 60s, because I think and this is going on of years of observation. I've been working in health clubs for a little bit more than 20 years. And so this is really, a lot of it's just observation. But as we get a little bit older, I think we tend to care a little bit less about physical appearance and really start paying attention to the fact that just moving and exercising and being active has a tremendous impact on our health and how we feel. And I think that shift is probably in the 40s or 50s, just from what I've heard from friends, clients, colleagues, and whatnot, that at about that age, in our 40s or 50s, we just start being a lot more mindful about how exercise makes us feel, as well as how it can make us look.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it starts to become less about that look and more about the longevity piece of it. And with research, there's been a lot of studies done around our telomeres, and that their shortening is a huge factor in our aging and how well or how poorly we age. How does exercise impact that telomere shortening?
Okay, well, and that's a great question. That's a very technical kind of biochem question, and I don't have the expertise to speak directly to like the telomere shortening, but what they're finding, what the evidence is showing, is that higher intensity exercise seems to be a better stress stimulus for initiating a bunch of effects that can help slow the aging process. For example, and this is where, and understand that I try to understand a lot more about aging as well. But when we start looking at telomeres, when you start looking at genetic, like being able to splice and move genes and be able to trigger certain genes, that's a little bit above my pay grade. I look at exercise and how exercise can influence these changes. And what we know is higher intensity exercise, like HIIT, high intensity interval training, and high intensity strength training. Higher intensity exercise puts the stress on the body that helps the body initiate production of new cells to begin with. So you're getting new satellite cells and new tissue cells is increasing the production. but it can also increase levels of mitochondria, which are how cells produce energy. There's evidence, and I know, and this is where I don't understand it completely, but there is evidence that high stress does manipulate the genes in the epigenome. But then to understand how exactly that works, again, is a little bit above my pay grade. But I just really look at how does that exercise impact the body, and really the evidence is pretty significant that it's the higher intensity exercise that can have a big impact on how we age.
Okay, so is there an age then at which HIIT activities are no longer safe, where people should be modifying them?
In my opinion, no, not at all, based on the evidence. And let me say this with a little bit of more background. If people are staying fit throughout the aging process, and I want listeners to be aware that the modern fitness industry goes back to about 1970. 1970 is when Arthur Jones invented Nautilus strength training equipment. It made strength training more accessible to the average individual. Nautilus strength training gave rise to the Modern Health Club. You also had Judy Shepard-Massett starting Jazzercise in the late 60s. Cooper Clinic was promoting aerobic exercise and jogging in the 70s. So we can trace the modern fitness industry back to that era. Well, if you take a look at that from a macro picture, here's the interesting thing, is that people who are in their 20s, the baby boomers who are in their 20s, as the fitness industry was getting started, those people who've been working out throughout their lifespan for the last 50 years or more, and I'm sure many of your listeners qualify, many of your listeners have probably had a health club membership on and off going back 40 or 50 years. Well, this is the fittest population ever of older adults that we've had. And what it's showing us is, where I'm going with this, what it's showing us is that if people remain active throughout aging, meaning they exercise, they do their favorite activities, they participate in strenuous activities, they need to monitor how intense they go, but they can still enjoy their favorite activities into their 60s and 70s. And I live in Southern California. I live in Carlsbad, which is north of San Diego, in San Diego County. And I can tell you that I go around here, I go on the mountain biking trails, I go down to take my kids to play at the beach, and it is very consistent to see people in their 60s and 70s surfing, mountain biking, doing everything, all the fun stuff that that Southern California has to offer. So all that to say is that there is not a specific age that we should stop high intensity activities. In fact, we should do them as long as possible, because it does help us just maintain our body just a little bit more efficiently.
You know, it's funny that you say that. You see more of these people in their 60s and 70s doing those activities, because I was actually just talking with my friend the other day about how, you know, like older adults, when we were younger, you know, 60, 70 seemed so old. And now you see them and you'd never really guess that they were in their 60s or in their 70s. You'd think more like 40s, 50s, because it seems like everybody's kind of like staying younger longer. And so it creates this perception of like age is just a number, and it is about your activity level and your health maintenance and whatnot that really determines what you can and can't do at any age, regardless.
But that's just it, right? That's just it? Is it really is? And you have to understand, my bias is I've worked in the fitness industry for more than 20 years. So a lot of my colleagues, a lot of the people I work around are associated with that. And it really is remarkable when I look at like the people I work with versus the general population. The people I work with who are in their 40s and 50s and even 60s now, like kind of this older generation of fitness professionals, they look years younger than other people in the general population who just haven't made fitness and health a priority. And that's really what it becomes, right? As we get a little bit older, it's like, you know what? Age is going to change our body a little bit. We're going to gain a pound or two. It doesn't, my opinion, that doesn't matter. If you have an extra pound or two of body weight, who cares? What matters is that you're active every day. You're using your body every day. You're challenging your muscles every day. You're getting your heart rate up a little bit every day, because it's that consistency, that everyday physical activity, which is really provides very strong evidence that we can control how aging affects the body.
Do you find that the diets you suggest or that your clients use changes with age as well? Or does that kind of, if you're eating a healthy diet, you're eating a healthy diet and there's not really any considerations there?
Oh, that's a fabulous question, because really when it comes to diet, and I am not an RDN. An RDN is a registered dietitian nutritionist. I do get a chance to talk to as many as possible for my podcast. And when I talk to nutritionists, people that study nutrition, there's a significant influence of nutrition on how we age. So as we age, we should be looking more towards the more whole foods, the foods that are easier and more readily made to digest, meaning fresh fruits and vegetables as opposed to cans and frozen fruits and vegetables. It just, the body has an easier time, the enzymes in the body have an easier time of breaking down and mixing with the enzymes of fresh food. So yeah, that becomes critical during the aging process. And then there are other things that we can do with nutrition, like for men specifically, men will produce less testosterone as part of aging. That just is a fact. But high intensity strength training, and then a diet that includes omega-3 and omega-6 fats, like found in freshwater fishes or found in nuts and oils, healthy oils. The omega-3 and omega-6 fats are a component of testosterone. So men over the age of 40 who want to increase testosterone can do it via a combination of strength training and nutrition. And that's where working with an RDN would be helpful to kind of go down that path. But yeah, little changes like that, just adding more intense exercise and taking a look at some of your diet and what you could be eating to support the natural anabolic, which are the growth-oriented processes in the body, very easy to apply and put into practice.
So speaking of strength training, one of the things that we see a lot with aging adults is loss of muscle mass. Is it possible to regain that muscle mass as you age, or is there an age at which you reach that you just kind of have to start mitigating that muscle loss rather than looking at building and growth?
Yeah, that right there is $1 million question, right? And I know there's a lot of research being done on that. I mean, full disclosure, a friend of mine is the chief science officer for a biotech startup looking at muscle growth and sarcopenia and whatnot. So we talk a little bit about what they're looking at in the lab, along with what we understand. But what it appears right now is we can't stop this age-related muscle loss, and we don't really know why it happens, right? I mean, going back to your question about the telomeres, it could be the structure of the cell DNA, it could be the structure of the cell itself, but we're not sure why it happens. But there has been some research to suggest that lifting weights can really significantly slow down this age-related muscle loss. I saw a study when I was writing my book, Ageless Intensity. I read one study that looked at powerlifters, masters level powerlifters in their 40s and 50s. And they compared these powerlifters to people of the same age group, but who didn't exercise. And they found that over the course of time, I think they tracked these people for 4 or 5 years, that the powerlifters lost muscle mass because they're in their 40s and 50s, but they lost it at a much, much slower rate. I think they lost 1% of muscle mass over the study period, as opposed to, I think it was like 3 or 4% of muscle mass for the average population during the same study period. And it's a small study sample, it's not a huge thing, but it just shows there's a little evidence that, yeah, strength training helps us maintain muscle mass even well into our later years, into our 70s and 80s.
That's interesting. Now, protein is thought of as kind of being the be-all, end-all when it comes to building that muscle mass. Are there other nutrients that you think of as being pertinent to that maintenance or growth as well?
It's funny because, again, not being a nutritionist and somebody who really studies nutrition scientists, but reading about this, I just sat through a talk the other week talking about intermittent fasting and the need to do protein supplementing during intermittent fasting, right? And that's where, for listeners, intermittent fasting is this practice of not eating for periods, and there are different models out there, between 14, 18 hours at a time, and then having periods of eating. And what reason why I'm bringing up intermittent fasting is one of the main things that we can do besides exercise to slow down aging is caloric restriction. When you look at the literature on extending lifespan and on longevity, the two things keep coming up are exercise and caloric restriction are the two ways to extend the lifespan. So there has been a lot of look at intermittent fasting, and there have been some pretty interesting studies that show that intermittent fasting or caloric restriction can slow down cell or can improve cell health, the function of cells. So where I'm going with that is intermittent fasting can be good for doing that, but if we want to maintain muscle mass or build muscle mass, we do need to supplement protein. We do need to, especially as we get a little bit older, because protein does support the muscle building processes. So that's where, to answer your question, I'm a proponent of looking at, of people considering intermittent fasting as we get a little bit older, for watching caloric intake and just having a structure to follow. But at the same time, I mean, that would need to be modified in order to be able to take in aminos or proteins to promote muscle growth. And like I said, this is an area that's been kind of piquing my interest, and so I haven't really kicked the tires or gone down a deep dive on it. But those are just a couple of the questions that come to mind. It's like, okay, intermittent fasting can be good for maintaining fitness during aging, but at the same time, we do need to take in protein to promote normal muscle growth. So more information to be forthcoming, I guess.
So then if someone hasn't been previously active, or they're not someone who's had that regular physical activity as part of their life, would something like intermittent fasting be a good place to start, or are they better just to start moving their body and kind of like baby step it that way?
Yeah, that's where, because when we look at this, right, I mean, people know they need to exercise and they know the benefits. At this point, they should understand the benefits of exercise, and that there are a number of health benefits, not just the extrinsic appearance stuff. The main thing that really the science now shifts from exercise science more to behavioral science, which is how do we institute behaviors, right? Because I'm much less concerned about what you're doing, I'd rather see you implement a behavior where you start doing something on a regular basis, meaning starting with just by drinking more water, drinking less soda, maybe going for a walk around the block 2 or 3 days a week. But starting to make small behavior changes can have a much greater effect long term than starting, because if you try to start something like an intermittent fasting plan and start a full soup to nuts strength training, resistance training, mobility exercise program, it might not be successful because you haven't implemented the basic habits of like having more water, getting more sleep, making time for exercise. So thinking about it that way, about making time for a 15-minute walk 3 times a week, that eventually evolves from making time for going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. But we got to start with the habits. So that really is, for somebody looking to start at this age or start a little bit later, my recommendation is just start making walking a habit. Whether it's with a friend, whether it's with an appointment with yourself, make it a habit, set that habit. And once you're consistent with that, then it's like, okay, what other activities are you interested in doing? Is there a fitness class that you'd like to take? Would you like to join a yoga studio? Would you like to join an indoor cycling studio or get an indoor cycling bike at home? It's then looking at what those other options are. But the mistake I see made often, and what I fear people make, is I'm gonna make all these changes overnight. I haven't done anything for the last number of months. I know I need to take my health into consideration. This week I'm gonna do this, and this. And if they fail at one of those, all of a sudden it's very easy to give up on everything. If you're trying to change your diet, change your nutrition, everything, change your activity, if you're trying to change too much at the same time, you can have nothing goes well. But if you just work on changing one thing at a time, one activity a week, one activity a month, then before long, then you've completely changed your lifestyle. And I think that's just a much more pragmatic way to approach that, about what can I do today, and let me start there and building up from that standpoint.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Have you looked at the kind of like the psychology behind how long it takes for people to build those habits? Do you have like a set? I think I've heard 21 days in some cases. I've heard 8 weeks in others. But have you looked into that and like come up with, I guess, standard recommendations that seem to work for your clients?
Well, and you're right, there's different studies that have shown, like, I mean, this behavior change theory, and there are a number of different components and variables in behavior change theory, and it tends to be seen relatively consistent is somewhere between 30 and 45 days. If you're doing something between 30 and 45 days, then it can become a habit. But that's what is so important about, I mean, part of behavior change theory are what's called vicarious experiences. This is where having a community, a like-minded community, is so important, because vicarious experiences means that if I see you doing it and I relate to you, you and I are both whatever age we are, we're both of the same gender for the sake of argument. If we're both of the same gender, both about the same age, and I see you having success at implementing a new activity or a healthy behavior, it makes it more likely if I say to myself, if she or he can do it, I can do it. And that's one component of behavior change, and why it's so important to become involved in a fitness studio or a community, because if you see other people around you having that success, it'll probably take a shorter period of time to implement healthy behavior changes. Whereas if you're just trying to do it on your own, trying to do it from home, or I'm doing it solo, not that it can't be done, but you don't have that support network. You don't see other people. You can't celebrate your successes like, hey, I went 5 days without having a soda, or even little things like that. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, for people that might drink 1 or 2 sodas a day, going a week without having a soda is a huge deal. And getting grouped in or getting into a community of people who are focused on health is a way to celebrate that. And that's really where I think one of the cool things is, I think we're in this shift right now. A lot of us in the industry, a lot of us educators in the industry are talking about this. And we're trying to be very mindful of it. But I think we're in this shift of people understanding that exercise is really about health and not necessarily about appearance. And I know we talk about that a lot as instructors and coaches. It's like, what language can we use to emphasize health and focusing on the health outcomes of exercise, as opposed to focusing on exercise for the sake of losing weight or for the sake of appearance. So all that to say that I think there's some cool stuff about how we can use exercise just to maintain health and control life going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's one of the positives that has come out of the pandemic that we've lived through over the last couple of years, is that people did start to put more focus on their wellness and their health, whether it be physical or mental health, both of which were very much affected by the isolation and whatnot that came out of it. And I also think more opportunities for community came out of it as well, because we kind of used to think, oh, it has to only be our gym community or whatever. But now with more online, there's a lot more opportunity for people to find other like-minded communities that they maybe fit in better if they're not the quote unquote gym buff, right, that has always been going to the gym, and they feel maybe uncomfortable at their local gym because it seems to be more advanced athletes there or whatever.
Yeah, that you're so right. And what's funny is I've had this conversation with a few friends in the industry and a few friends not in the fitness industry, and the conversation focused on like what did we learn? What's something positive that we took out of the experience of 2020? And the one theme that keeps popping up is community, the need to have community, the sense that when we got stuck in quarantine, that all of a sudden we lost it. We weren't able to see the people we saw every day. And for some of us, there's a direct tie-in, there's a direct correlation, mental health, physical health, everything goes together. So, and I think that's what is one of the cool things, is we were able to find community through being online together. And we realized the value of community and things. It might not be exercise. Maybe it's the group at your local coffee shop. Maybe it's the group you volunteer with at your faith-based organization. I mean, just having that community, I think, is so critical. That's one of the main things about exercise and fitness that people overlook, is that sense of, if you're going to a gym, if you're going to a studio on a regular basis, that does become an extended family. That does become an extended community. You are a part of, and that's what a lot of people overlook. When you go to a studio, you automatically are welcomed into that community. And I'll share this, but just the other night I went to a breathing and meditation studio for the first time. And they did a really good job of making me feel welcome and making me feel like I was part of that, of the people practicing there on a regular basis.
And that's super important too, especially when you are foraying into a new world, right? Like if you're someone who's never gone to a gym in your life and this is something you're now trying, then that sense of feeling welcome definitely makes it easier, versus where you feel dejected and kind of like an outsider. You're more likely to keep up with it when you're comfortable.
And we get that because we're idiots when we're young kids, and I say that with all loving grace. But we're idiots when we're young kids, and and we take out our insecurities on other people. And so if we make fun of somebody in a gym class 30, 40, 50 years ago, we don't realize what effect that has on them later in life, and having that relationship. Because I can't tell you, there are a number of people I've worked with over the years who, because they had a negative experience in PE growing up, they didn't feel like they could be a part of a fitness center or of a health club community. And health clubs can be very intimidating, but everybody is there for the same reason. Everybody goes to a health club because they're trying to get 1% better that day. And a friend of mine posted a meme a number of years ago, and I absolutely love this. And the meme was, there's a picture of an overweight person on a treadmill, and the meme was, making fun of an overweight person at a gym is like making fun of a homeless person at a job fair. Both are trying to do something to improve their lives. And that really, and that encapsulates a lot. I think people would be surprised if people have had this stigma about health clubs or studios as kind of being, that can be, but for the most part, people want to see you succeed. The other people in classes, other people at the gym want to see you do well. And that can be, again, another powerful stimulus for joining some kind of club or some kind of studio where you can create that sense of community.
Yeah, I think honestly, our biggest roadblocks are our own mental roadblocks that we put up, right? And it's a matter of finding ways to get past those or reshape those so that they fit with what we need for a healthier lifestyle. So are there workouts or exercise types that are more efficient than others for those people that are kind of taking their first steps?
That's where the workouts that for people starting, I would look at, like for group workouts, I would definitely look at things like gentle yoga, bar class would be a place to start, indoor cycling. And those are classes that would be they're more, I don't want to say lower intensity, but they're not focused on high intensity, if that makes sense. So an indoor cycling class, here's the thing, I've taught indoor cycling for 20 years and I've never seen two bikes run into each other. I've seen a lot of silly things happen in an indoor cycling studio, but I've never seen one bike run into the bike in front of it. Excuse me, meaning that you can go at your own pace. You could be somebody who's brand new riding in front of somebody who's pretending to be the next Lance Armstrong, and both you're going to get a good workout and you're not going to bump into each other. So group cycling is a great way to get started because you can go at your own pace. Bar is a non-intimidating way to start strength training. And then yoga, I mean, we all need a chance to move and breathe for an hour at a time. And if you start doing those 2 or 3 classes and you just go with it, that's a great foundation. That'll be a great foundation for a fitness program right there.
And does your recovery time change with age, or are there ways to help maintain a recovery time regardless of the activity?
I love that. I've noticed that my recovery time changes at my 5th birthday. At 35 and at 45, I tended to recover a little bit longer. And yeah, it does. I mean, and we got to remember that exercise is stress imposed upon the body. That's what it is. Exercise is physical stress. When we're younger, in our teens and 20s, man, we're very resilient, both mentally, whatever. I mean, physically, we can go through it and handle a lot. But as we age, the cells in our body, the systems, the structures in our body take just a little longer to do their job. You do a really high intensity workout at 25, you're a little bit more efficient. It might only take you one night to recover and be ready to go the next day. But at 45, 20 years later, your muscles just they're going to be efficient at working, but they need a little bit more time to restore and replace the energy they spent, to maybe repair some of the damaged fibers and maybe be ready to go again. And that's where, as we age, you can still do 2 or 3 hard workouts a week, and you should, but you just need to respect your body and listen to it more and take that recovery time. And one of the cool things about the last few years in sports is recovery is becoming a much more prevalent topic. In NBA, they're calling it load management. And we all know what Tom Brady's been doing and playing football at 44 years old. And so now we can have this thought of like, hey, I've been working out really hard. I've been going really hard. It's okay for me to take a day off and go for a walk today, or if it's okay for me to take a day off and just do some gentle movement, because we understand a lot more about the role of recovery and the benefit of that day off. But yeah, as we age, we definitely just need to listen to our body more and honor it by giving a little bit more time between those really hard workouts.
So then would active recovery be the better option than kind of just taking a full day off of just rest?
100%. Yeah, it goes back to that idea. We want to move a little bit. We want to move a little bit every day, right? And if you did a really hard workout yesterday and you're feeling a little bit beat up today, the best thing you can do is get out and move a little bit. Get out for a long walk or get out for a gentle yoga class. And that's the type of program I try to recommend to readers of Ageless Intensity, is that 2 or 3 days a week, you want to do a hard workout. But 2 or 3 days a week, you want to do like a low intensity to easy workout, because it's that low intensity to easy workout is when your body's actually adapting to the stresses of a hard workout. So they go hand in hand. And the funny thing is, we have this idea in our head that was, and this goes back to the dawn of the fitness industry, that if there's no pain, there's no gain, or we got to go for the burn. And we need to kind of leave those mottos back in the 70s and 80s where they started, because really we just got to listen to, pain means your body is doing something it shouldn't be doing. Discomfort means your body's working at a level it's not used to doing. And we need to listen to our body. And is that discomfort or is that pain? Because if it's pain, we should stop. And we shouldn't try to push through to pain. And no burn. I mean, that burning just means your muscles are working at a high level of intensity and they need a little bit of time to recover afterwards. So yeah, as we get older, we just need to do a much better job of listening to our body and honoring it with rest when we need it.
Right. No, that totally makes sense for sure. Awesome. So I really appreciate you chatting with me today. And if our listeners want to learn more from you, I know you mentioned your book is Ageless Intensity, and they can find that on your Twitter account, as well as you have your own podcast. And I believe it's all about fitness, correct?
Correct. Yeah. All about fitness. And you get a lot of conversations like these. I talk to researchers. I talk to people that create the programs and products, and just really try to help listeners understand how exercise changes the body.
So thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me spend some time with your listeners.
Thank you for listening to Supplementing Health. For more information about our guests, past shows, and future topics, please visit aor.ca/podcast or aor.us/podcast. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? We invite you to engage with us on social media to request a future topic, or email us at marketing@aor.ca.